Welcome to Real Mob Stories with James Proctor. Coming up next is my exclusive interview with MICHAEL FRANZESE. Most people know MICHAEL on YouTube as he is a capo regime in the Columbo crime family and is the son of the infamous mobster Sonny Franzese. My interview lasted 90 minutes, and so it's been broken into two different parts. I want folks to know that MICHAEL answered every single question that I posed to him. The first part deals with several topics and include revelations never shared before. Thank you for watching the interview, and please like the video. Also, if you haven't subscribed to Real Mob Stories with James Proctor, please consider doing so, as we're focused on bringing you hard-hitting interviews in addition to the YouTube 60-second mob history shorts, which are the staple of the channel. Without further delay, on to the interview with MICHAEL FRANZESE. All right, I'm here with MICHAEL FRANZESE. How are you doing today?
I'm good, James. Very good,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, no problem. I love what you're doing, and any way I can help, I told you I would, but you just keep
Yes.
doing the good work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And so, you went through thousands of interviews, and so my hope is that that we could touch on some topics and questions that you haven't been asked 1,000 times before. And I'm more of a historian by heart, and so I'm really curious about a lot of aspects of your life that I haven't heard about before. So you were in Australia, I believe, in 2015. You were interviewed by a guy named Frank Robson, and you were talking about your early life. And according to the article, you realized that that your father was part of that life when you were 10 years old. And so, what was the event that actually caused you to realize that your father was something special, and how did your life change as a result of that?
Well, James, it happened even earlier than that, and I can't say that with this particular incident that I knew what my father was or who he was, but it was something that until today is vividly, stuck in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had moved us out of Brooklyn, me and my mom, and we went to live with my grandmother who lived in Long Island.
Right.
And I was probably 4 years old, 5 years old, something like that. And my dad had been gone for a couple of days.
Right.
And then one morning, he came to the house. He came to my grandmother's house. And I came downstairs and I was sitting on the step. And he walked in. It was a smaller house, not a big house, but he walked in the front door. He hadn't shaved in a while. He had a
Wow.
beard. And my
Mm.
dad had a heavy beard to begin with. And I remember his right-hand guy at the time, Joey Brancata, who I used to call Uncle Joe, was on the front porch. And he was kind
Mm.
of like just roaming on the front porch. And my dad hugged my mom, and it was kind of emotional. And then he came over to me and hugged me. And then he was there for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. Then they left.
Mm.
Well, it was kind of strange, the whole scene, the way it happened. And obviously, I learned later on that that was during the Gallo-Profaci War. So my dad hadn't been home and he moved us and so on and so forth. So that was the earliest date that I realized there was something different going on. But then, yeah, about 10 years old, there was an article that came out called "The Hood in the Neighborhood." My dad was getting a lot of publicity at that
Oh
time.
yeah.
And so I started to read that, and then we had a maid from Great Britain. Her name was Pauline, and she started to fill me in on different things about my dad. So that's when I
Wow.
started to realize it.
And then, at some point, then, that you found out, I guess, that your mother had been married before. And so, did you know anything about her first husband? I know that in that same article, it said that basically he disappeared. And so I was kind of wondering, did that mean that someone took him out, or did he just kind of disappear and move out of the city?
Yeah, no, he wasn't taken out. He actually died young. He died at the age of 44 of cancer.
Mm,
But I never knew him. I didn't
yeah.
know who he was. But what I believe happened, James, and this
Yeah.
wasn't said to me specifically, but I
Right.
believe my dad kind of gave him a warning never to come around. So he never did. Obviously, you
Hmm.
get a warning from Sonny Franzese, you're not coming around.
Yeah.
So as a result, I just never seen him. Never
Hmm.
met, didn't know who he was, and that was it.
How long do you know how long your mom was together with him?
You know, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I
Yeah.
never really got the right story on that. I mean,
Huh.
at first I thought that I was Sonny's adopted son. That's what I believed most of my life until my mother made a revelation later on in my life that he was my real dad. I just know this, that she was with him a short time. I think what happened, James, honestly, is that my mom got pregnant. She was 16 when she met my dad.
Yeah.
She got
Right.
pregnant at 16. I was born when she was 17. And at that time, in Brooklyn, Italian, you didn't get, pregnant out of wedlock. So
Right.
my grandparents, in order to protect their image or whatever, they had her marry this guy,
Mm.
Louis. My father, Sonny Franzese, was married with three children, wasn't allowed to get a divorce back then.
Right.
Couldn't do it
Hmm.
until his wife ran away and left him with the kids. So
Mm.
she just left. And that's when he was able to get a divorce. And that's when Louis Grillo was gone. And I'm in Sonny Franzise's life. So, but I never
Yeah.
knew Louis. I was a baby when all of this happened.
So then you end up, you grew up and then you graduate from high school and you go off to college. And so you're studying pre-med. And so it's about this time that your father ended up getting convicted of the bank robbery conspiracy. And, based on my research, he didn't do that. He had no part of that. It was a setup by the government. I totally believe that. And so, yeah, I know that your father was a big part of your life, and that's kind of when you got started in that life. But who else were kind of your mentors early on in your career as an associate?
Well, really, during the 60s, my dad went to trial three times. It was
Yes.
larceny, it was murder, and then obviously the bank robbery case. And there's no question that my dad was framed on the bank robbery.
Right.
1000%. I'll take that to my grave. We investigated that case thoroughly. Every
Right.
witness recanted their testimony. James, we even gave them lie detector tests that Newsday
Mm,
actually monitored and found out that they were lying at the trial and they told the truth that my father was framed. But we couldn't get the conviction overturned.
mm.
But so that happened through a very volatile 60s. Throughout that time, my dad did spend some time on the murder case. They locked him up. He was in jail during the trial. But, he was my idol. I mean, I love my dad, and he was a good
Sure.
person to me. And James, I'll tell you, anybody ever said that I was a stepson or adopted son, he would get very upset. He didn't
Mm,
want to do that. And so I always wondered why, why was that so upsetting to him? But I guess I found out later on. But
yeah.
he was my mentor. Yeah, my Uncle Joe, who was married to my grandmother's sister, my aunt. He was a merchant marine, a hard driving, tough guy, and he was a mentor to me. And then even little Joey Brancato for a while, I was close with Joey, and he was my mentor. Joe Vataco was another one of my dad's
Yep.
soldiers. He was a mentor. So I had a lot of good people around me, at least at that time.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then as you was being groomed to that life, I know that you had a car dealership, correct, and you were making legitimate income. But what were you doing in that life during those days as an associate?
Well, things started out kind of rough for me because at the age of 20, I was indicted three times myself, actually four times.
Really?
I was indicted for grand larceny and a number of other cases. I went to trial on all three, all four, and I got three hung juries and then a case dismissed.
Okay.
But it was a very volatile time for me. I was on trial for over a year. It was a result of somebody that I was with that turned out to be an informant that got
Mm,
himself in trouble and fingered me and a couple other guys on something. It was a nonsense case, and it turned
yeah.
out that way. But so I had that going on. My dad, who was in Leavenworth at that time, was very upset with me. He said to
Mm.
me, "You have more indictments at the age of 20 than I've had my whole life practically." So
Oh gosh. Yeah.
he was upset with that. He was upset that I wasn't continuing school. I got close with Joe Columbo and was actually active in the American Civil Rights League. So it was a rough time. But as far as business was concerned, Jim, I was always very aggressive. I had kind of a head for business. So at first, my dad had owned a body shop, and I started working in an auto body shop. and did very well for myself. I was buying cars, fixing them, and selling them. And then I took ownership of the body shop, and that led me to get into a Mazda dealership through a circumstances. So I
Yeah.
had a new car agency at a young age, and
Wow.
then I was in charge. One of the Columbo guys that I knew very well, Vinny Vingo, his name was. He put me in charge of a flea market that he had on Long Island. I used to work it on the weekends, and before you knew, I was shellacking money to a lot of the vendors, and I started to make a lot of money at a young age.
Yeah, and I remember you telling a little bit about that story before. And so you mentioned about the Italian American Civil Rights League. And so obviously going on, there was the two Unity Day events. I know the second one, obviously that's when Joe Colombo, got shot. What's your opinion on that? You hear a lot of talk about Joey Gallo being part of it. Then you hear that Carlo Gambino was upset with Joe Colombo. I spoke with Chris Colombo. He thinks it was actually the government that did it. But what's your thoughts on who was part of this Joe Colombo conspiracy?
Well, let me tell you, I mean, I was very active in the league, and I love
Yeah,
Joe Colombo. He was a mentor to me. He was always very good to me, and I believe the league was a way to get my father out of prison. That's why I was so active. But I mean, the talk at the time, because obviously that was my era, and I was close, and I had my ear to the wall. The talk was Joey Gallo. In my heart, after hearing everything that I've heard, I believe it was the government that set Joey
yeah,
up. I do
hmm,
believe Carlo Gambino and a couple other people are upset with the fact that Joe was going on late night television and he was bringing a lot of heat line, in front of the FBI building, which I was marching on
yeah,
daily. That brought a lot of heat to a lot of guys. They weren't happy about it, guys that
yeah,
the FBI really didn't know, they got known, from walking that line. So I mean, there was
right,
some dissension, but I have to believe it was the FBI, because they hated James. They hated what we were doing. I
hmm,
mean, we were on that line. They were throwing water balloons down from the FBI building onto the line, throwing stuff,
wow,
throwing eggs down on us. I mean, they hated
hmm,
everything that we were there. So I wouldn't put it past them. I don't have any evidence, and of course,
right.
I've heard that it was Joey Gallo, um, but I believe it was the FBI.
No, that's exactly what Chris Colombo thinks too. And so we know later on that Joe Gallo gets taken out in Umberto's in 1972, and so and that was during your era. So what was happening within the Colombo family after Colombo gets shot and then Gallo gets killed? And I know this was part of that second Colombo War, and so how did that change your routine? Did anyone hit the mattresses per se, or what were you doing to safeguard yourself, or were you concerned?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there was a little disarray at that time, but I have to say that Persico Jr., he kind of calmed things down pretty quick, and it was obvious or evident that he was taking over. And then he installed Tom DeBella as his
Yeah,
acting boss, and Andrew Russo was kind of Tom's right-hand guy at the time. And so
right.
things settled down after not too long a period of time. Brought us in and, just talked to us and told us this is the way it's going to be. And I was a
Yeah.
recruit at that time. I wasn't a made guy yet, but they settled things down pretty quickly after Gallo got shot.
So you didn't really have any issues then per se. You continued to do what you were doing. You didn't you know go into hiding or anything like that, I guess.
I was told to be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for a while we stayed out of Brooklyn a little bit. They told me just stay at home until we call you. That wasn't, it was a couple of weeks. It wasn't that lengthy a period of time. But they just said be careful, because at that point in time, like I said, I was a recruit. Everything was just getting settled and who was going to be where. But like I said, Persico extended himself pretty quickly and calmed things down.
That makes sense. And then we'll move forward to 1975. So, the books had been closed for nearly 20 years. And my understanding is that books got closed because people were selling buttons. That's what I heard Frank Scalise and may even Anastasia. And so they put a halt on making guys. And so, you got these guys in this mob genre that are they're so specific and worry about every little detail. But there's a little controversy about when you got made. You've always said Halloween night, 1975, but then you have people say, "Oh, that's not possible because Carlo Gambino died in 76. People didn't start getting made till January of 76. Then I've even heard it was you got made in 77 or 78. So what do you say to people that say that, oh, you got made in 76 or 78?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know that's been controversial. Let me tell you something. Whether I get married on 70, I'm married. Whether I get married in 77 or
uh,
75, I mean, what's the difference? But
yeah.
I'll tell you how I know it was 75. I was married to my first wife in June of 1975. Even during that time, it was funny because Andrew knew I was getting married, and he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, we hope we don't call you on your wedding day." Um,
Ah,
yeah, and it was a couple of months after that that I guess. So I know for sure it was 75. And understand this, the families, different dates. I mean,
yeah.
everybody can do it at the same time. All five families did whenever they wanted. But
Mm-hmm.
the books were open in the mid 70s. And
Yeah.
and no question that I was pushed up ahead because that was my
Mm-hmm.
father's request. And
Sure.
they honored that. And there was a couple other guys. Persico's son got made early. A
Yeah.
few other guys, that got made early. So I'm sure of the date, but if people want to argue with that, what's the difference at this point?
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. So, what changed for you within the Columbo family when you got made? So, did that mean that you actually had a crew underneath you of associates? So, between the time when you got made and when you started the gas scam in the early '80s, what was your main money making rackets?
Well, two things happened. I was immediately made acting captain for my father, and that was again a courtesy that they gave to him because I had to handle everything for him, and as well as start to build my own deal. So, once again, I was very aggressive, and I did have a crew of guys under me. They were my guys, they were associates, and I got to tell you, James, there was a time when I had about 15 of my associates, guys that were under me, them all together one time. And I told
Mm-hmm.
them, listen, if any of you have a desire to be made, I said, this is not the place for you. I
Mm.
said, I'm not going to propose any one of you. It's not going to happen here. And they said, why? I said, I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to put a lot of time and effort into you. And if I propose you and you get made, I lose you.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I understand if you want to be made, you're free to go anywhere else. No hard feelings. We're friends. You could leave right now. I said, however, if you guys want to make money, this is the place to be because we're going
Right.
to, well, I can tell you that nobody left. Nobody left.
Wow.
They wanted to earn. And so that was
Mm.
kind of my deal at the time. I wouldn't propose anybody for that reason, but I also didn't, resent anybody that wanted to leave because I get it. But look, I started out early. I had these dealerships. It grew into another car dealership,
Yeah.
and then just things started to skyrocket until obviously the gas business came about, and that was the big deal for me.
Did you have any disciplinary issues that you dealt with your associates?
Well, listen, you always got trouble with guys. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
question. I mean, James, if I had $1 for every sit down I had over,
Mm.
either made guys that were under me or guys in my crew that were associates, I can't even get to tell you, but pretty well. I mean, they were pretty well disciplined because look, when guys are making money and there's no miscontent or anything, then things go pretty smooth normally. So, we had a crew that was making money and it was all right. But it was some of the made guys that, they had a gambling issue. They didn't pay a debt.
Yeah.
They tried to move in on somebody that they shouldn't have moved in on. So you had a lot of that. So I had a lot of sit downs with respect to that. But normal course of business.
You were acting capo, and then when did you get promoted to full capo?
1980.
In '80. Okay, so that was right about the time of the gas scam, then, right?
It was about a year after.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little about a year after that. And listen, I'll be really honest with you, James. I think
Hmm.
around the same time, I don't know if you know this, they broke my father. They took his captaincy away from him. Not because he did anything wrong, but because Persico Jr. was saying they were protecting my father because he kept getting violated for association. He used that as a reason to break him. I was
Mm,
extremely upset about that. I was the one that said, just calm down, don't worry about it. But they made me a captain, and I'm going to be honest with you too. I believe the reason they made me a captain was because, you know, when I was sending money up, money goes first to your captain and then to the boss.
yeah.
Well, if you're a captain, there's nobody in between you and the boss. So now all the money
Mm,
goes directly to the boss. And I was
yeah.
bringing in a lot of money. So I believe that was one of the reasons that they made me report only to the boss.
Yeah.
But I got it. My father and I talked about it. And then my dad just said, hey, if that's how it is, that's how it is. Don't worry about it.
So by the mid 80s, you had several businesses and were, very wealthy by that point. And then that article in 1986 comes out, Fortune magazine, the 50 most wealthy and powerful mob bosses. I believe you're ranked what, number 18, I believe?
18. Yeah.
18. And so what did that article do? Did it create friction within the Columbo family? Because I always hear that you mentioned that, it seemed like people were, if you're a big money maker, as you were, people want to attach themselves to you. And I know other families wanted to get involved in the gas scam with you and all of that. So what type of friction occurred because of that article, or did no one even care?
No, people listen, prior to that article, I'll tell you what really happened
Yeah.
that gave me some headaches. It was an article, James, I believe it was the Long Island Press. I don't even recall exactly. I think it was the Long Island Press. It's a defunct
Yeah.
paper now, but there was an article that came out that said that I was becoming powerful enough to break away from the Columbos and start my own family. It
Mm.
was a total fantasy, total
Yeah.
fiction. It was absolutely untrue. It was silly, but it did start to create a little friction on the street
Mm.
because I know that there was people that was sent to talk to my Russian partners in the gas business. They were
Yeah.
sent to. I had actually a meeting one night that I was put on the spot with after that article came out because the
Hmm.
article said I was making $2 billion,
Oh,
which
wow.
which was obviously an exaggeration. We're making a lot
Mm.
of money. It wasn't 2 billion,
Yeah.
um, but it gets into people's heads.
Mm.
So I got questioned. I got really put on the spot, and we came out of it fine because I said, hey, all of a sudden there's an article about me that everybody believes when it's somebody else, it's all nonsense.
Yeah.
And so I calmed everything down. Everything was fine after that. But it caused some trouble back then, and it caused me a little to question my dad because my
Mm.
dad at that time he didn't stand up for me as well as he could have. And I'll tell you this, James, and why this is significant now is because it was the first time my father and I ever had any kind of issue between us, ever.
Mm.
And I never mentioned anything to him. I didn't say to him, why didn't you stand up for me a little bit more?
Right.
But it played heavily on my mind. It was one of the factors that later on made me decide that this is a life I got to walk away from because if it can separate father and son, there's something going on wrong here. Now, I didn't make that move, and which we'll get into until 2 years later because I just
Right.
kept with inside. But it
Right.
was it was a factor that played into my decision, no question.
Curious things is a lot of these guys made guys, they had social clubs, or they had, everyone had a headquarters. So where did your crew, where did you have a social club, or where did your crew meet
I had
typically
a
on a
club in
daily basis?
Greenpoint. Yeah, I was in
Mm-hmm.
Greenpoint, which was our old neighborhood. And so if I had to meet guys from Brooklyn, I would meet them there. If I had to meet guys on Long Island, which really became my headquarters, I had a place on Monday nights. It was called Mondays. Night, if you wanted to see me, you had to come to that club. And I would
Oh,
sit
wow.
down with whoever, we had a room in the back and you wanted to come and meet me for any reason. If I didn't know you, you'd come then.
Yeah, so you had two places then, and so
Yeah.
yeah, and that makes sense because you had Greenpoint, then you had, but yeah, that's one thing I noticed is as you progressed up that a lot of your
Boxing.
activities were more on Long Island. So
Just addressing the 1986 article.
yeah,
Um, they actually, it was a huge article. It was half the magazine. They featured six of us. I was one of the six. And yeah, they had that chart. I was in prison at the time. So when it happened,
Okay.
yeah, when it happened, I was in where was I? I was in Arizona. They had me before they sent me to Terminal Island,
Yeah.
and actually locked me down when the article came out because the
Oh,
guy that wrote it was all over television talking about it. So they locked me down. But it was a silly article. I said they didn't ask for our tax returns. How do you
how do
measure
you?
wealth? It was the chart was ridiculous, but it caused problems within the system because now
Hmm.
you don't want publicity when you're in prison because
No.
they don't like it.
Who were the other? Who were some of the other people in this article? You said there were six people, six mobsters.
Oh gosh, I forget who they highlighted. I know Junior was one of them. Persico, I think.
Uh-huh.
I forget who the other ones are. I haven't looked at the article in ages, but
Oh
there were
wow.
six of us that they kind of highlighted, and I was one of them.
Okay. So, with your indictments, there was a question. A lot of people, they talk about the one on the gas scam, but I'm kind of curious about the one before that. So, one of the ones involved a loan sharking case, and I saw an article where it looked like you were involved with Jimmy Rotondo and maybe Anthony Capo and Corky Vistola. Did
Yeah,
you? So those were that was the Cavalcante family within New York, right?
yeah, that was the Giuliani case. That was in the Southern
Yeah,
District of Manhattan. Yeah, and Jimmy Rotunda and I were one and two. We were the two main defendants on that, and
yeah,
it was a not again. The allegation was that there was a leasing company ran by two Jewish guys, Mel
hmm,
Cooper and Jesse Hyman,
yeah,
and they had about maybe 1,500, don't quote me exactly,
yeah,
legitimate leasing loans on the street. And
yeah,
then they had about 30 Shylock loans to the extent of about $2 million.
right,
And they claimed that I put up the $2 million. Wasn't true. I didn't put up the $2 million.
yeah,
I was acquitted in that. Oh, it's funny, James. I think there was seven Italian guys. We all got acquitted, and all the Jewish guys got convicted.
yeah. There was like eight Jewish guys and seven Italian. The eight Jewish guys get convicted, and the seven Italian are acquitted. So you knew what did you think of Jimmy Rotondo?
I liked him a lot. Jimmy and I were
Yeah.
very, very close, very friendly. I liked Jimmy a lot. He was a good guy, and was with him in court every day for months. Liked him, and I felt really bad what happened to him later on.
What do you have any clue why he was taken out like that? That just, I mean, I don't understand that because he was definitely seemed to be well liked. I mean, it's funny, his son, I believe Anthony, he's similar to you. He was college educated and everything,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
was brought in to kind of take over his father's stuff.
yeah. I don't know why. I never got a clear story on that. And I was close with John Riggi also. We were very close. So I never inquired because it happened a little later on for me, but I felt really bad. I'm still close with his son, Vinny Rotundo. But I felt bad. I liked him a lot. He was a good friend.
And then Anthony Capo, did you know him?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true. I've heard that he developed a drug problem, and a lot of people later on, he gets made after I believe the Fred Weiss hit, and he was close to John D'Amato, and he ends up apparently not well liked as he grew older. I don't know if you experienced some of his idiosyncrasies or not.
No, not really. I wasn't really tight with him and I knew him, but yeah, I had heard some things about him also. I mean,
Yeah,
look, you hear all this talk on the street about people, but
yeah.
I can't comment any further than that.
And then you knew Corky as well.
I knew Corky very well. I had a couple of run-ins with him,
Yeah.
always in the music or entertainment business. He was one of the guys that tried to put a hit on Norby Walters.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah.
So I think there's a lot of, and then about the indictment. So the timeline I think is interesting, and so like you said, you got indicted. You had the Giuliani case. You were acquitted on that, and then your partner in the gas scam, Larry
Iorizzo.
Iorizzo. Okay,
Iorizzo.
that's an I. Okay, and so he becomes an informant, right? And then he points the finger at you, and then you end up with a plea agreement in March of '86, where you agree to a 10-year sentence and then restitution of 14.7 million. But then, and then you had the state charges where you pleaded out where you would get a 9-year concurrent sentence, but then you were required to pay another 3 million in restitution to the state of
Yeah.
Florida. You had all of that happening, and then it's my understanding then during that time that you left the mob in '85, correct?
Well, here's what happened,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you're asking, James, because there's so much nonsense goes on. To tell you about social media, people make statements. They make statements as if they're facts. And
Right.
unlike yourself, that does research and says the proper things, a lot of people just shoot from the hip, and whether they like you, they don't like you. It
Right.
depends on how they feel about you, and that's what they say, true or not.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
here's exactly what happened. My partner, Iorizzo, did become an informant. What happened, he was on trial for an unrelated tax matter, unrelated to our business. Through the trial, and I don't know if you know, he was 6'4",
Mm-hmm.
450 pounds, huge guy. And we both had houses in Florida. He had a house in Boca, I had a house in Delray Beach. And
Mm-hmm.
one day while he's on trial, he comes to me and he says, Chief, I'm leaving. He said, I can't do time. I don't know if I'm going to get convicted. I'm going down. We had a compound in Panama that we
Right.
had. And he said, I'm going down to Panama. I can still run things from down there.
Mm.
Tried to talk him out of it. I said, you're going to be a fugitive. You can never come back to the States. We had plenty of money. He said, don't worry about it. So he jumps on our private plane. He skips out on trial and he goes to Panama. Well,
Wow.
there was no extradition at the time between Panama and the United States. That's why he felt safe.
Okay.
But here's what happened. Everybody knew he was down there. The feds went down there in the middle of the night and kidnapped him. They kidnapped him from his home and bring him back to Florida. And
Wow.
that's when he started cooperating on me because they wanted me. That's when they started cooperating. Now I get on trial. I get indicted with Giuliani. I'm on trial. Giuliani in the Southern District has an argument with the Eastern District that was preparing the gas case against me based upon his testimony. And they want Iorizzo to testify against me in the Southern District. They
Mm.
have a huge fight.
Wow.
Giuliani wins. Giuliani wins. Iorizzo testifies against me in the Southern District. We destroyed him on the witness stand. Destroyed him.
Mm.
Jury didn't
Yep.
believe him. I get acquitted. So
Yep.
now what happens, listen to this, James. Now
Yeah.
the Eastern District is saying you're worthless. You couldn't convict Michael. We're throwing you out of the program. He and I
Wow.
had he and I had an account in Austria. We
Mm-hmm.
had about $33 million in the account. And it was a numbered account. We each had half the numbers. So nobody can go to it without the other guy.
Right.
When he first became a cooperating witness, I told his son, don't tell your father I'll fight him in court, but don't give up the money. That's our money. And
Mm-hmm.
so he didn't give up the money until they were going to throw him out of the program. So now he gave up the money because he's trying to ingratiate himself even more.
Mm.
So, but here's what happened. Because I defeated him in the trial, the Eastern District now was very worried about losing again. Remember, I had beaten them 5 times. I told my lawyer as part of my exit strategy, I said, look, I want to take a plea. We have leverage with the government now because I beat their main witness. That's
Right.
when the plea deal started to negotiate. They
Mm.
started out with $100 million fine and 25 years in prison. And when he gave up that 33 million, the feds go to Austria and they say, we got half the numbered account. We want you to release it. It's
Mm-hmm.
mob. Austria says, I don't care what money it is. You have to bring us the entire deal. All right. The
Right.
entire thing. So
Mm-hmm.
my lawyer comes back and said, this is more negotiation. If you give that up, I'll get the sentence all the way down and maybe we can reduce the fine. So
Mm-hmm.
long story short, I give him the other half and they go get that 33 million. And meanwhile, my fine is reduced to 14.7 and my time is reduced to 10 years. That's how we were able to negotiate that. And I want to make
Yes.
this clear for everybody so that there was no cooperation agreement whatsoever. That agreement is public. Anybody can look it up or whatever. There was no agreement to cooperate at that point in time. This
Right.
was my exit strategy because I had made the decision after I met my wife that I was going to marry, my young girl I was going to marry, that I was I was leaving. But I couldn't
Yeah.
tell everybody. I can't go to, and say, hey guys, by the way, I'm sending in my resignation. I wouldn't have walked out of the room. But it was a plan that I had because the way I figured it, James, is that look, I'll do a couple of years in prison. I'll pay them some money. I'm going to move out to California. When I get out of prison, I'll have parole and probation. I can use that as an excuse not to meet up with anybody. Everybody's going through their own trouble. Maybe after 10 years, they'll forget about me and I'll live happily ever after. That was my initial plan. And
Right.
I hate to have to keep saying this, but I need to say it because what I'm telling you here is the gospel truth.
Yeah.
You can uncover no evidence to the contrary because it doesn't exist. That was my plan. That was it. I was walking away at that point in time, and that was the entire plan. Things started to change later on, and we can get into that.
No,
I
go ahead.
always challenge, and James, you're a good investigator. I challenge anybody to find something to the contrary. That's the exact gospel truth.
I believe that, I'm sorry, 85 is when you go to prison, right? You
Yes.
into, and so about 3.5, 4 years later, they ask you to testify against Norby Walters, right? Was there another case that was coming against you because you were given immunity? So how is it that you were called to testify against Norby?
Okay. Let me tell you what happens again. I'm in Terminal Island, three and a
Yeah,
half, almost 4 years.
yeah,
They pick me up in the middle of the night out of
yeah.
nowhere. And they take me. I said, where am I going? I had no idea. And they told me there's a case going on in Chicago. I didn't
Mhm.
even know about it. They bring me to Oklahoma first on my way into Chicago. I only get on with my lawyer, Bruce Kelton at the time. And I said, what's going on? He finds out that Norby Walters is under indictment and they're bringing me in as part of the case. And I
Mhm.
said, for what? Now, what happened was during that time, well, prior to me going in, let me go back. Norby, I knew my whole life, my
Yeah,
entire life. I called him Uncle Norby. We were in business together. I had given Norby $250,000 to be in the sports agency business. That
right.
was my big thing, him and Lloyd Bloom. What I find out later is that he was, when athletes tried to get out of the deal they had with him, he started threatening them with my name and my
Yes.
father's name.
Hmm.
Okay. So now when they tell me that, I said, look, I'm in jail. I don't know what Norby was doing. I have no idea. I send word to Norby Walters and my father at the same time because they said, look, we're going to indict you, your father, and possibly your brother. Because my brother was going up to Norby. My brother had a drug addict, and money that Norby was supposed to be given to me and my dad was giving to my brother. My brother never got it to us. He was just taking
Right.
them because of his drug problem.
Yeah.
So um, I said, I don't know what Norby's doing. I'm not threatening anybody. I'm in jail all of this time. Make a long story short, and this is the truth, and I have no problem saying it. I put it on. I went to see my father. I told my father, and I went to see him. I had somebody came in. I sent a message to my father. Listen, Dad, I'm not doing another day for Norby Walters. I saved his life 3 times. Once from Corky Vastola, once from my father, stage delicatessen. My father told Norby he was going to kill him because
Hmm.
he wasn't handing in the money he was supposed to do. Corky Vastola wanted to kill him. I saved him then. And Persico wanted to kill him because he was using our name and never came up with any money. I know this guy my whole life. I get tickets from him. We don't need the money. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. So now, and again, I've never revealed this. I send word to Norby. I said, Norby, I heard they want to give Bloom 12 months and you 15 months. Take the plea and leave me and my father and my brother alone. He refuses. So I said, listen, subpoena me and I'll come in. And I said, I'll
Hmm.
tell you what I know. And what I know is that I'm his partner. I gave him 250,000. I never seen a dime back. And I don't know who he's threatening. I'm in jail. I don't know what he's doing. I was one of 25 witnesses. The other
Hmm.
witnesses were the actual athletes that he threatened, the actual administrators of the college that he got involved in. He had 25 witnesses against him. Honestly, I was window dressing. But here's what I said. I said, listen, I'm going to let people know what I'm doing, but they're still not going to like it. I said, so understand that. I said, I want immunity from this. I don't want you people ever to come back at me at it. So obviously they gave me immunity for anything having to do with that case. That was it. You want me to get in a little further? Because I can explain
Sure.
the thing I've done it.
Sure. Did you have a 302 or anything?
I probably did. Yeah, I'm sure there was a
Yeah.
302.
Yeah.
There must have been. I don't remember, Jan, a long time ago, but
Right.
normally they talk to you, there's a 302. And again, this is public. Whatever I'm
Hmm.
telling you, 302s are public. So now after it's all over, Ed McDonald from the Eastern District gets in touch with the people in Chicago and says Franzese just put a death warrant on him. He can't
Hmm.
testify. He's going to get killed. They didn't know that I had sent word down what I was going to do. So
Hmm.
they now all come out to Chicago to visit with me. Sitting down in Anton Valukas was the U.S. attorney, was sitting in his office. They took me out of the jail that I was in, and they
Right.
said, "Look, he's there with what's his name? McDonald is there with 3 or 4 FBI agents." And they tell me,
Right.
"Listen, you're a dead man. Word's all over the street. You can't do what you did. Cooperate with us. We'll put you in a program." My exact words to him was, "F you. I don't like any of you guys. You framed my father. You put me through hell. Leave me alone." I walked out of the room. The agents in Chicago comes following me out. He liked me a lot. He liked
Hmm.
me, I gotta be honest. And he says, listen, he said, you're making us look bad in there. I said, well, I don't care about it. This isn't about you. This is about my life. He said, I'm going to give you some information. He said, take it to the bank. I said, what's that? Ed McDonald was head of the organized crime strike force, and you can look it up. They're disbanding the strike force. It's only going to be around for a couple of months. He said, Michael, you're a smart guy. You do what you do, manipulate these guys. He said, you'll never have to testify against anybody if you're
Hmm.
smart. And so I go back in the room and I said, what do you guys want? They said, well, we want you to cooperate. I said, we got to put a time limit on it. Okay. They wanted 5 years. I said, no good. 1 year.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. It was the first time ever, from what I was told afterwards, that they put a time limit on it. You have 1 year. Ed McDonald knew, and he said this publicly as a video on it, that I could have
Hmm.
hurt a ton of people. He knew
Hmm.
that. So they thought they had the golden goose. From that point on, all I did was screw them around. Never gave them anything that could put anybody in prison, never did anything. This was part of my plan. I was given that advice. Within 6 or 7 months, the strike force disbanded and nobody ever talked to me again. The year went up and that was it. So, what I have always said and what I will maintain 1000%, and I challenge anybody to find differently, I never gave any information that could put anybody in prison. Let me address one other thing. They put me in front of Congress, boxing. We testified in Congress. I don't remember the year, but I knew it was a dog and pony show. Indicting people, they weren't arresting people. Nobody got arrested. Nobody got indicted. Nothing was of that information was used. It was the same thing. I gave them stuff that I knew that couldn't hurt anybody, and that's what mattered to me. And I also told them, I put it on record with my dad. I said, Dad, nobody's going to like what I'm doing, but I'm not going to hurt anybody. And I said, trust me on that. And you'll see at the end of the day, nobody's going to get hurt. That's exactly what happened. I'll
What
tell you
did your
what, that's,
father think about that? Did he say anything?
he said, son, you're a smart guy. I don't like what you're doing, but I hope you know what you're doing. That's what he told me.
Okay.
Even with the Norby thing, I told him, listen, I'm protecting both of us here because they're going to give us both a headache. I told him.
Hmm.
So can I say he loved what I was doing? No, but he understood. Now let's take it a step further. Take it a step further. So now what happens? I'm out on parole. The feds were all over me still. I had a very hard time on parole because they still, even after the year was up, they kept telling me you're going to die and all this kind of stuff. And all the
Yeah.
kind of nonsense I had to go through. Finally, I'm on parole one morning in home in California. They called me the night before. They said there's agents picking you up at 6 in the morning. We're bringing you into Newark, New Jersey. I said,
Hmm.
why? John Riggy was on trial.
Yeah.
John Riggy, my friend, he and I had a deal where we were getting money on every window that came in from in Manhattan. Jesse Hyman, who got convicted on the Giuliani case, knew that whole thing. He gave him a 302 about it. And so they asked me about it. I said, yeah, I was partners with that. So now they bring me in to testify. I'm not testifying against John Riggy. There's no way. So
Yeah.
what I told him, I said, listen, I knew I had immunity for any crime that I committed prior to my plea agreement in 85. So I
Right.
said, listen, I'm going to tell you everything that happened, but this was my deal. I did it all. Riggy had nothing to do with this. So put me on the stand. I'm ready to go. I
Hmm.
didn't refuse because they said, if you refuse, we're going to indict you for contempt and all of this stuff. Got so angry with me that night, the prosecutor, they started cursing me out. They put me back on a plane and they send me back to California. And then they start to cook up this whole parole violation on me and I get violated. Back to prison and everybody on the street saying, this guy's not hurting anybody. And why would they put him back in prison? Then what happens? Sally Machota, I think you know that name, a Columbo
Hmm.
guy,
Yeah.
turns informant, turns informant. He implicates me in 5 murders. Okay. Daily News calls me when I'm in prison. Machota implicated you in 5 murders. I said he's lying. And I'm sorry
Hmm.
I'm going on, but James, you give me the
No,
opportunity.
that's fine. I
And I
want to
trust
hear
you.
this.
I
Yeah.
trust you to tell the truth. So
Yes.
now I go back and I put it on. When I tell my father, I said, Dad, listen. I said, I got a visit from the FBI in here in Lompoc. I said, they told me one or two things. Either I cooperate with them with Machota or they're going to indict me for these murders with him. I said, I'm not going to cooperate. I said, but you know, I can hurt a lot of guys with this. I'm not going to do it. And I took a real chance. What happens is Mishota gets thrown out of the witness protection program for lying. His evidence was squashed. They never
Hmm.
bothered me again. But since I had sent that word back, everybody realized that I wasn't going to hurt anybody. And that's the
Right.
real story. That's why I got through all of this. And people knew it. You know, let me address one other thing because I know you'll bring it up. They did bring me in. I had gotten some information out of a grand jury from somebody that worked for me, and I believe it was her boyfriend that gave it to her that gave it to me. They brought me in again by subpoena to testify. I said, look, I got the information. I didn't do anything with it. I didn't use it. It didn't matter to me. And that's all I told them on the trial. I don't know if the guy got convicted or not because I never met the guy. I didn't know who he was. Those are the only 2 instances. It was Norby and that guy. So let me go even a step further. If people want to call me a rat and call me all the names they can, I don't care about any of that. I understand the guys that are on here. But James, what I told you was the gospel truth.
And
One other
so,
thing, and I think you
yeah,
know that
yeah.
John Gleason, who was the head of that cooperation agreement with me, in
Hmm.
his book stated that I gave them nothing of value and I led them on a wild goose chase. That was John Gleason, the
Yeah.
prosecutor. It was
Yeah.
his statement saying that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is that his exact quotes was he gave us nothing of value about anyone in Cosa Nostra. We essentially view him as a con man. And prosecutors said that Franzese was no longer considered by the government to be a federal cooperating witness because of his parole violations. And so what it sounded like is that you were violated because you weren't giving them value.
That's exactly it. And I was
Yeah.
told that straight out afterwards. And even they reached me in there, if you want to change your mind, I said, I'll do the violation. And they were even going to indict me on, they said they were going to indict me on these murder cases, and they never did. So, because they couldn't, it was nonsense again. But look, I went through it, James, a lot of stuff. And, I look at this differently, James. I was
Hmm.
part of my life. When I walked away, I wasn't mad at anybody. I didn't say anybody hurt me, betrayed me. That's the life. You understand that things don't always go the right way. Blame the life. I didn't blame anybody. I just knew that if I wanted to move on in my life and give a life to my wife and my children, that I had to get out because the RICO law was destroying that life, number one.
Yes, it was.
Already had 7 indictments. There was no way that I was going to last on the street. They were either going to put me away forever or whatever. So to me, the right move was to walk away, and that's what I did.
Thank you for watching the first part of my two-part interview with Michael Franzese. The second part delves into several topics. I asked Michael about Larry Champagne and if he was involved in his rub-out. He tells me a few things about Champagne never revealed before. Other topics include his relationship with Sammy Gravano and why he became friends with Sammy after saying that on John Gotti's worst day, Sammy couldn't shine Gotti's shoes. We also ask about several other people on YouTube, including Anthony Ruggiano, Gene Borello, and Larry Mazza. Please visit Michael Franzese's YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't. Also, he has a YouTube show he does with CHAZZ Palmiteri called The Wise and the Wise Guy. Finally, you'll want to check out Franzese Wine, which is available for shipping to many states. Two more plugs and we're done. Please check out My Father's Daughter with Angel Gotti Patreon page and also Wrestling with the Devil, a Lee Cole 3 podcast. All the links will be below in the video description. You won't want to miss the second part of my interview with Michael Franzese. Take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.